the religious substrate of political morality, wokeism. What if the most powerful religion of the 21st century doesn't have a god? No churches, no priests, just hashtags, slogans, and HR policies. They call it wokeness, but beneath the politics, something older is stirring. A moral movement that behaves almost exactly like a faith. A faith that promises redemption through awareness. Mary Harrington writes in Why It's Time to Take Wokeness Seriously. The West may have thought it had outgrown religion. It has merely changed its name. Sociologists like Emil Durkheim, Max Weber, René Girard have long argued that even secular societies reconstitute religious structures around new moral frameworks. When traditional religion declines, moral energies and existential anxieties don't vanish. They reorganize around new symbolic orders. In the case of wokeness, many scholars argue that social justice ideology has taken on the form, tone, and function of a religion, complete with saints, sinners, rituals, heresies, and redemption narratives. Morality doesn't disappear, it migrates. And today, our ancient instincts, guilt, confession, purity, have re-emerged in the language of social justice. White privilege becomes original sin. Confession takes the form of public apology. Heresy becomes problematic speech. And salvation? Hope and redemption through activism, maintaining collective purity with cancel culture, preaching like a moral authority. We didn't lose religion. We reinvented it. Wokeness begins as a moral reaction to injustice, an attempt to repair trauma and inequality. But in seeking to abolish sin, it recreates the logic of sin itself, moral hierarchy, guilt. In their work Woke Psychopathology, a Taxonomy, authors Michael Schellenberger and Peter Boghossian describe what they call repeating patterns, distinct psychological dynamics that appear within certain ideological movements. They call this phenomenon woke psychopathology. First, moral absolutism, a mindset that divides the world into saints and sinners. Here, morality is black and white, the oppressed and the oppressors. Complexity is stripped away, replaced with clear moral narratives. Psychologists call this splitting, a dynamic often seen in borderline behavior. Second, ideological obsession. Every word, every gesture, is policed for purity. There's a constant, repetitive checking. Did I say that right? Did I use the right term? Like an obsessive-compulsive ritual. It's about maintaining group purity through self-surveillance. This manifests in linguistic policing and confession culture. Third, outrage addiction. Anger becomes a dopamine hit. Moral outrage isn't just a reaction. It's an identity. It generates engagement, solidarity, and a steady drip of stimulation. Fourth, victimhood narcissism, where suffering becomes social status. Victim identity fuses with moral superiority. Suffering itself becomes a form of power. Fifth, empathic overreach. Unbounded empathy that spirals into exhaustion, or even hostility. It protects one's moral image while masking aggression. Sixth, the collective purity delusion. The belief that society can be morally purified, that with enough censorship, correction, and control, we can create a spotless world. But this belief, they warn, often justifies authoritarian tendencies. A new form of moral totalitarianism, religious fundamentalism without the religion. And finally, performative solidarity disorder. Social media is the new cathedral. Its algorithms reward outrage, confession, and moral display. The louder the virtue, the bigger the reward. From a socio-political psychology perspective, woke psychopathology can be modeled as a moral, effective ecosystem in which moral purity becomes a source of social power. Emotional contagion substitutes for rational deliberation. Language policing functions as social control. And victimhood and virtue become intertwined currencies. It's not madness, but rather a collective cognitive, moral distortion. An adaptive response to real injustices that metastasizes into ideological rigidity when moral emotion outpaces epistemic discipline. Like every faith, this one has rituals, profile banners, public apologies, call-outs. Each act signals purity, proof that you belong to the moral community. But when belonging depends on constant repentance, fear replaces empathy. People stop speaking, not because they've changed, but because they're afraid to sin. The creed is now institutionalized, inside universities, corporations, media. A bureaucracy of virtue. Paperwork for purity. Max Weber might call it the rationalization of the sacred. When moral life becomes a system of forms and trainings. The original dream was justice and inclusion, but when purity becomes policy, compassion hardens into control. Wokeness began as empathy, an awakening against real injustice. But somewhere, moral energy fused with certainty. The pursuit of justice turned into a crusade for purity. It's the oldest story in human psychology. The same sacred instinct that built temples now builds hashtags. And the same hunger for salvation that once looked upward, now looks online. So what do we do with this? Not mock it. Understand it. The need to be righteous, to belong, to heal the world. Maybe the next moral evolution isn't to abandon belief, but to remember. Justice needs empathy, and truth needs doubt. Woke-ism, say thinkers like Christopher Lasch and Mary Harrington, is not madness. It's morality looking for a home. A new religion born in the ruins of the old. Lasch warned decades ago that the West was drifting into a moral void. A world where the self replaced the soul, and therapy replaced virtue. When faith, family, and community crumble, people don't stop being moral. They just look for meaning somewhere else. And so identity became the new religion. Belonging replaced belief. Outrage replaced prayer. Mary Harrington calls this the new status faith. It's a religion without transcendence, a moral hunger fed by feelings and algorithms. What was once spiritual now lives as performance. What was once sacred now trends for 24 hours and vanishes. Lasch saw what comes next. When people worship identity, society fragments. When we trade virtue for validation, we lose trust, gratitude, and humility. We become moral entrepreneurs in a marketplace of guilt. Harrington calls it the sanctification of emotion. Empathy as deity, compassion enforced like dogma. But both thinkers offer a way out, not a political fix, a moral one. Lasch says, rebuild the small things, family, work, neighborhood, where virtue is lived, not branded. Harrington says, rediscover limits. Not every feeling is truth. Not every injustice can be purified. Freedom needs boundaries, or it becomes chaos disguised as compassion. Together they remind us, the answer to wokeism isn't cynicism or cruelty. It's the recovery of meaning, the resacralization of the everyday. Jonathan Haidt in The Coddling of the American Mind emphasizes rebuilding moral humility and pluralism, reforming education toward anti-fragility, teaching students to confront, not avoid discomfort, prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child. Jordan Peterson in 12 Rules for Life and Beyond Order argues that the solution for wokeism is beginning moral reforms within the individual, not the collective, cleaning your room, restoring order in your own life as the foundation for societal health, re-anchoring morality in logos, truth, hierarchy of competence, and meaning through responsibility. Douglas Murray in The Madness of Crowds argues the importance of reaffirming civilizational confidence, the right to love your own culture without apology, defending truth-telling and rational debate as moral virtues. Alain Finkielkraut, French philosopher, writes in The Defeat of the Mind, to defend universalism, truth that transcends race, gender, and identity. The sacred never disappears, it only changes form. Maybe wokeness isn't madness. Maybe it's the ghost of religion, still searching for redemption in a world that no longer believes.